Welcome to the 116th episode of the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Rutherford. Stay tuned for my interview with Jamie Mason, author of the thriller novel Three Graves Full. Peter Straub, the New York Times bestselling author of Ghost Story and the co-author of The Talisman and other books with Stephen King, had this to say about Three Graves Full. Three Graves Full is an astonishing debut novel, smart and stylish and wonderfully light on its feet. Jamie Mason writes crisp, surprising sentences, and this aura of wit infuses her lovely plot with an absolutely Hitchcockian menace. Stay tuned for my interview with Jamie Mason. Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Jamie Mason. Mason's novel, Three Graves Full, was just published by Gallery Books. Jamie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. Well, I wondered at the outset if you could read the first page or two of your new novel, Three Graves Full.
Absolutely. This is kind of fun because that will actually be my first public reading of this ever. We haven't done a launch event yet for a few days, so I've never done this before. Please bear with me.
Great.
Okay. Chapter 1. There's very little peace for a man with a body buried in his backyard. Jason Getty had grown accustomed to the strangling night terrors, the random prickling palms, the bright aching surges of adrenaline at the sight of Mrs. Truesdale's dog trotting across the lawn with some unidentifiable thing clamped in its jaws. It had been 17 months since he'd sweated over the narrow trench he'd carved at the back border of his property, since he rolled the body out of the real world and into his dreams. Strangely, though, it wasn't recalling the muffled crunch of bone that plagued him, nor the memory of the cleaning afterward, hours of it, all the while marveling that his heart could pound that hard for that long. No. It was that first shovelful of dark dirt spraying across the white sheet at the bottom of the grave that came to him every time he closed his eyes to sleep. Was it deep enough? He didn't know. He wasn't a gravedigger. Then again, in his mind, he wasn't a murderer either, but facts are facts. No disaster can stay shiny and new forever. No worry has ever been invented that the mind cannot bully down into mere background noise. For the first few days and weeks, Jason thought of nothing else. Every night, sometimes twice a night, and one fretful night, the first time it rained, it was 6 times, he slipped through the shadows to the margin of evergreen and poplar, the mark that ended his acreage, check and recheck the integrity of the secret. To his eyes, the rectangle of disturbed earth might as well have been bordered in neon. It was a gaudy exhibit to the barbaric instinct that lay curled at the core of every tamed human brain. Evolution had brought us out of the trees, and culture had neutered the beast, but even a eunuch can get angry.
Great. Well, if the listeners haven't heard about your new novel yet, how would you describe Three Graves Full?
Three Graves Full is somebody wanted me to give them a Twitter pitch, and I said when gardeners discover a body in a guy's yard, the homeowner is horrified, but mostly that's because it's not the body he planted out back a long time ago. So it is about a guy who has killed someone and buried him in the back. Jason isn't a bad guy. He's just a guy who's prone to do the wrong thing, and so he sweats it out. And unfortunately, a different crime scene is discovered at the front of his house, and so he has to cooperate with the authorities, all the while kind of dying about what's going on in the back of his yard. So it's horrible. It's kind of funny in a horrible, sad sort of way, and that was what I wanted to kind of hit almost somebody said the trouble with Harry, kind of Hitchcockian, but horrifying, funny. So I'm hoping that's what I did. That's what I tried for.
Great. Well, I know that it's your debut novel. What was your writing path that led you to writing and having Three Graves Full published? Were you always writing when you were younger? What was that like?
Well, that's kind of a funny story because when I was a little kid, adults used to ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I told them I wanted to be a writer, but I was lying. I would say that because adults thought that was very impressive, and adults would always go, ooh, when you said that, and I really liked ooh. But what I didn't realize is that I was already doing it. I love to read, and I narrated everything in my head constantly since I was a little kid. But it never really occurred to me to write anything down. And in my career, before I had children, I was in personal banking, and apparently I used to write great memos. People would say, "You write the greatest memos." And then, just one day, so I used to always love to get the opportunity to write a great memo. So one day when I was, I guess I was 31, I got a bolt out of the blue, really, and I ran home and I decided to write something down, and I had never done it really, and it did not end up being this book. I wrote one other book before this that I think has training wheel marks all over it. Someday I might revisit it. But once I started writing, I knew that I had a new dream, and then over the course of the years, I learned the business, and I tried to learn the craft. And Three Graves Full is the second book I wrote, the first novel published.
Right. And do you remember what gave you the original idea or inspiration for writing Three Graves Full?
Absolutely. That's one of the most fun things about having this published is that I get to tell the story of its inception. I work with a guy in the UK, a novelist who is nobody knows him yet. His name is Graham Cameron, but he's a genius, and you will know. And he and I swap work, and we critique each other's work. And I was actually doing something else, and I was very frustrated because I'd gotten stuck and I couldn't make it work. And I think he had gotten frustrated with hearing my frustration, and he said, "Forget it, just go to the internet." He said, "Go to newspapers." And he told me to pull out some headlines, just random headlines that sounded interesting. But I was under very strict instructions not to read the article. He said, "Do not read it." He said, "Just look at your list, pick a headline, and write a story that would result in that headline." And the one that I picked, which was funny, I was such a good little girl that I never did read the article. I have no idea where I saw it, so I don't know what the true story is. But the headline was "Landscapers Find Skull in Mulch Bed." And that ended up being the inspiration for the book.
That's funny. So along the way of writing, were you also writing any short fiction, or just mainly working on that earlier novel and then Three Graves Full?
Mostly the earlier novel and Three Graves Full. I have started a third one, so I was working on that. I wrote one piece of, I guess, what they call flash fiction, but between really trying to focus on the novel and the other things that I do just in life, I have not yet really written short stories, or I do write a little poetry, which I love, but it's one of those things where it's of a certain taste. Some people like it, some people don't.
Right. Well, I know that in addition to your personal website, which involves Three Graves Full, you also run a website called Author Scoop. Can you tell us a little bit about Author Scoop? What is it exactly, and how did that get started?
Absolutely. AuthorScoop.com is it's just a little daily news portal. I was invited to come on board. It's run by William Haskins, just a tremendous poet and writer out of Austin, Texas, and he and I are friends. And he asked, "Hey, do you want to do this?" Because we love books and we love business, and right now reading in bookstores and publishing in general is sort of an embattled art form. So we just wanted to do something to make it very easy for people to keep abreast of little news snippets, just to keep it at the forefront of their mind if they stop by Author Scoop. So in the mornings we have literary news, and then sometimes in the afternoon we'll have a video. In the evening we'll have a book review feature where we just find interesting book reviews, and we link to other people's work. There's some original content on the site, but it is mostly just a one-stop shop for current literary news. But we do have some original content. We have an interview series and an essay series that we have by invitation. So I love it. It's a great place to just like I said in the book and in the acknowledgments, that he always had me elbow deep in the business every day anyway, and so this was a great thing.
Great. Well, that's Author Scoop, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes so people can check that out. And given your work with that, and as you just mentioned, obviously you are aware of kind of the current travails of independent bookstores, and obviously the I think for many people in book publishing, the kind of, trying to think of the best word to describe it, but the just lightning fast way that ebooks have taken off since the launch of the Kindle in 2007. I just wonder, I mean, given that you now have a book out in hardback and ebook, just given your thoughts about the industry, where do you think things are headed, or what's your thoughts about where things stand in terms of book publishing and book retailing?
Sure. Now, I'll have to say, apparently this is not very writerly of me. I have a Nook, a Barnes & Noble Nook. I absolutely love reading on my Nook. One of the most amazing things is that with e-readers, you do end up being able to basically carry a library or a bookstore around in your pocket, which I think is a tremendous thing. I understand the conflict. What I really hope to see, and I know that I believe Tor is doing it, several publishers, and Angry Robot was the first one that I ran across. They're doing bundling where they're printing a book, because a lot of us, and I'm one of them, I love having the physical book. I love it for lots of reasons, for looking at it and petting it and having it on the shelf like a trophy and lending and all kinds of things. Love it for the artwork. But what I would love to see is to see it bundled with a code for digital download.
Sure.
Because I do love reading on my e-reader. So I'm hoping that's going to become, that's the way that works with DVDs. Now you buy the Blu-ray, you get the electronic copy that you can put on your phone or your iPad or whatever you like.
Right.
So I do hope the books go that way. That would be tremendous. And I know that a lot of people out there are saying, oh, books are dying, publishing is dying. But I swear I've read some of the best stuff ever in the last couple of years. So I hear it and I see some numbers that support it, and still I can't believe it because there's just beautiful books out there. So.
Yeah, I think I totally hear you, and I kind of walk around conflicted all the time because I absolutely love going into bookstores, but I also have I have a Nook and I also have a Kindle as well. And I just,
it's funny how many people have multiple.
I know. I mean, I think, part of it is I'm just so interested in book publishing, and I publish some ebooks as well, that I just wanted to be able to, see both of them and see how things look. But I think that sometimes people kind of confuse kind of the transformation of book retailing with reading. And I think people are reading even more. I mean, if you think about, sure, I mean, there's lots of people who look at videos or listen to podcasts, but I think that, the great majority of things that people do online, they're reading. They may not be a novel, but they're reading.
Absolutely. And we also have to remember that that's where a lot of other things come from. I as much as I look at book news and then try to be up on things, I am constantly surprised at how many films and TV shows and all these things, the story came from a book. So that's where stories are born. It in many different media, I should say, it started with a book. And so, it's changing. It is changing. But I think it always has been. It's always the best of times and the worst of times. I mean, it's just the way we see things. We're always the center of our own little universe, and everything looks like it's happening on our fulcrum when it's always been this way, I think.
Sure. So what, I know that you read a lot. What books or authors have you read in the past year or two that really stood out for you and that you would recommend or mention?
Oh, man, I have had the most fun year in reading. A few weeks ago, I actually did something really fun. I had, with Gallery Books, they said, well, why don't you host a little giveaway? So I had 5 advanced review copies. And one of the hard parts about being a new author, especially in this age of social media, is that it's very easy to fall into the trap of tweeting and Facebooking over and over again. Hey, did you see my book? I have a book. I have a book coming out. Did I mention I have a book? I really become a horrible, horrible creature. So I thought, how could I make it fun and not all about me, because that's really getting itchy. So I asked. I was going to give away 5, and I had people enter the contest. But whoever entered the contest got to assign me a book to read, and I had a readathon. I read 5 books in 5 days. So I got some great stuff. I had Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore. I don't know how in the world I had missed that one. That was terrific. And I'm actually finally getting to read Neil Gaiman's American Gods. That was one of my assignments that I did not finish in the week. Over the year, what have I loved? I finally got to read Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. That was tremendous. A Visit from the Goon Squad. These weren't necessarily last year's books,
Sure,
but
sure.
I got to them last year.
Yep.
Gone Girl. I loved Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl. Stephen King, the 11/22/63. Thought that was great.
Yeah, I'm actually reading that now.
I loved
Stephen
it.
King.
There was a really, I'm a huge fan. There was a small little book that I just loved. The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating. It's a tiny little book that just ended up being really impactful. Algonquin books, I think, Chapel Hill, but there's just a ton of great reading. So,
That's
people
great.
say there isn't good stuff out there. And I've had a great reading here.
Great. I'll link to some of those that you mentioned in the show notes so people can check that out. So what is your writing process like? Are you more of an organic writer, or do you outline? What's that like for you?
This one, I haven't done it enough to probably define what kind of writer I am. This one was not outlined. I think, in hindsight, I probably would prefer, I'm kind of a very organized person. And I did a lot of flying by the seat of my pants in this one, and it ended up coming into an outline, but it also caused me probably unnecessary stress. A lot of writers, you're told, just get it on the page, vomit it out, and fix it up later. But that doesn't really work for me. I start getting preoccupied with the wake of destruction I'm leaving behind me, so I have a tendency to write a little bit and edit that, and then write a little bit and edit that. Apparently that is not the prescribed way to do it. That's just the way I like to do it. And who knows, as I go on, I may find, in fact, the one I'm writing now, I'm writing out of order, which I'm writing as the scenes occur to me. And I'm finding that just terrific. So I think there's lots of ways. I don't, all the ways to skin a cat. I don't know what's the one way everybody knows, but
Sure.
So my biggest problem is that I do have 2 daughters, and so there's a lot of scheduling, so I have to kind of make sure I force myself to get a block of work in, because it is so important. You'll never get done if you don't sit down and do it.
Yeah. So given that that your debut novel is now published, what advice do you have for aspiring writers who would like to get their own novels published?
The two things I think is to find somebody who's better than you are, and go ahead and take your skin off and let them just let them have at it, and develop an ability to take criticism, and to find someone, like I said, find someone who's better than you, and to see if you can establish a relationship and get advice from somebody you admire. That's hugely important. And also to keep your hopes and expectations in different places. This is a very long process for most people. And then, of course, I'm sure there are lots of overnight successes. I just haven't met one yet. It's a long process. It's hard. You get told no a lot. And then when you get told yes, you don't know whether to dance or wind your wristwatch. It's very amazing. So keeping your hopes and expectations and trying to keep a hold of your head, because it's a hard business, and it can rattle your relationships in life if you don't take care to keep those hopes and expectations a little bit separated. So that's what I would say.
Great. What are you working on now?
And also, like everybody.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Right now, No. I was just saying also what everybody else says is read a lot. Everybody says that, but they say that because it's true. Read a lot. Read books you even don't like. Sometimes it's just as valuable to know what you don't want to do as to know what you want to do. As far as what I'm working on right now, I'm working on another novel. I'd like to think that it would sit comfortably with Three Graves Full. It's another suspense type thing. This one has a small element of a spy novel in it, and I've got a lot going on in personally, and so it's a little bit slow going, but I hope to be done by summertime.
Great. Well, again, we've been speaking with Jamie Mason, author of the novel Three Graves Full, which is available in bookstores now. Jamie, thanks for doing the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.